My name is Jared Olar. I'm with the staff of the Pekin Public Library, and this is a local history, oral history video project that we're doing. Today is Thursday, the 6th of May in the year 2021, and I'm at the home of Harriet of Pekin, and we're going to be doing an interview with her. She is 100 years old this year, and we're going to ask her what she remembers about Pekin's history and about her, some of the stories and things that she remembers of her life over the past century. Tell everybody your name and when you were born and all that.
Well, my name was Harriet Winkle, and my parents were Elsie and Winkle and Oscar Winkle of Pekin. I was born in the hospital, and I wasn't very old at that time either. And well, then was an only child, and then when I was 9, we took in a cousin whose mother had a brain tumor and passed away a year later, and Joyce was 6 months old when we got her, and so we always considered her as my sister, and she passed away 10 years ago, something like that. And what else did you want to know there?
What actually was the day, month and day that you were born?
The what?
The month and day that you were born.
Oh, well, January 18th, 1921.
1921, okay. All right. Any favorite or significant memories from your childhood?
Well, I can remember back things when I was 3 years old. I remember a great aunt that was ill with cancer, and went to see her at her home. She passed away shortly after that. And I had my tonsils out when I was 4 at the hospital. And then my mother had surgery over in Bloomington, and I remember going over with my dad on the train over there and walking down the hall holding his hand, and she was in a bed way up, it seemed like. But basically those are memories are few and far between, of course, at this point. I remember I was 2 years old when we got our first car, and I recall going over the Pekin Bridge, which was a plank bridge at that time, and you kind of held your breath till you got to the other side. But then that was replaced in 1930. And of course I remember the store, Rulings. My dad had worked there since I was about 2, and I started in high school, working after school on Saturdays some of the time. And
You'd mentioned before, and when you started at Rulings, it was because you had some, were there some aunts who married some of the Ruling boys?
Yes, I had 2 great aunts by the name of Winkle, and they married brothers, 2 Ruling brothers. And my dad had worked at, well, he had a little men's shop early on. I don't know if that was before he was married or not, but then he worked at the Corn Products as paymaster for a few years, and then they asked him to come into the store because one of the brothers, I think, well, the Ruling brothers, their mother was a Herget and was a sister of the ones that started the bank and so on. So we were related to relation, but not directly. But Dad worked worked there from, I think, 1923 on all his life. Then I started in when I was in high school, kind of general flunky, mostly helping things in the office, which is more my cup of tea, working in the math, cashier and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you said it was known as the Perch, where you were located in Rulings.
Well, the way it was designed, early on the office was in the back, along the wall, but then when later on they moved it up and it was like in a little box more in the middle of the store where the clerks brought their sales slip with the money or charge or whatever it was. So that everybody always called that. It was up a little higher and called it the Perch.
Yeah, kind of like a sort of a pulpit kind of thing, huh?
Yeah.
So like a perching like a bird or something.
Yeah.
And I believe your niece had mentioned that that I guess Rulings never actually had a cash register machine, that you just took care of all the exchange of money yourself.
Yeah. They just started in there at the office and they made change and all. No, we never did have a cash register. And unfortunately, we closed up before it got into the computer bit. So, which is not my cup of tea.
Yeah. Do you remember about what year Rulings closed up then? Because you were there right up to the end, right?
Yes, it was in 1995, I believe it was.
Okay.
By that time, well, way back, we had probably around 18 employees. Of course, when it closed, there were just 5 of us, and just really kept it going just for something for me to do. Because everything else downtown pretty much had either moved away or closed up.
Okay. Now, you talked about how you started working at Rulings when you were in high school. So let's talk a little bit about your schooling. Well, where did you go to grade school? And of course, then you would have gone to Pekin High School.
Yeah. Well, I started at Douglas School, and the principal there, Mrs. Fair, her husband was the mayor, I believe, at that time. And so I knew her. I was always very shy as a young child, still am more or less. And the boundary was up, the next street up, I think, 7th Street. We lived on Haynes Avenue. But Douglas School was about 4 blocks away, and the Jefferson School was quite maybe 8 or 10 blocks. So I didn't start on the first day of school. My folks had a petition, I guess, to let me go to Douglas School, which finally came through, so I was a few days late. And then went to Washington Junior High, and then Pekin High.
Okay.
And that was Depression years, and I really didn't want to go to college anyway, and had a job at the store, at that time, so I just went right in there.
Okay. How did you meet your husband? And what was his name?
His name was Walter Harris, and he was always known as Bus, and he was the oldest of 8 or 9 kids, I think, at that time. And well, there were a whole string, mostly boys, and they were all athletes, so it was a well-known family. But I didn't know him. There was one brother a year older than I, or in the next grade, and 1 year behind, so everybody knew who most of the Harrises was, but I didn't know him, and I don't remember how exactly we got together, but see, most everybody was married by that time. So I was one of the last ones in our crowd, one of two or three.
Okay. Went to, before, I think you mentioned to me that you went to, was it St. John's Lutheran?
No, St. Paul's Episcopal.
Sorry. Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I should have brought my notes from last
Or
time.
I'm the
St. Paul's
100-year-old member. I think I've been there more than anybody else for all these years, ever since it started.
Okay. And when you, as a member of St. Paul's Episcopal, then you were also, did you also hold a church office in helping the church out?
Oh yeah, I've been in everything. In the guilds, I held several memberships on what we call our vestry, which is the board. And I was treasurer for 45 years. And once I retired, I got into most of the gardening and took care of the flower beds and stuff like that. No,
Okay.
I've always been active.
When we talked last time, I say that the church treasurer position it was.
Mm-hmm.
You held that for a very long time. Is that right?
45 years.
45 years then. And I think you said that there were some changes in the diocesan rules.
Yes, I think they'd had some trouble somewhere in the diocese, and they made a rule that could only hold that for 6 years, and then you had to be off 2.
Okay.
But I've always been very honest and trustworthy, and all the bills were paid on time and everything accounted for.
Yeah, very good. All right. So you've begun to tell us about your job at Rulings. So let's talk a little bit about Rulings and downtown Pekin and the businesses there. So first of all, where was Rulings located?
It was across the street from the courthouse, and
That was right on Court Street then, right?
yes, and that corner, the Herget Bank had been there for years, and this was part of the same building. And before my time, I think it had, well, that was part of the all family, more or less, anyway. And then they expanded next door, and there were a lot of retail shops. I mean, it was just all retail. We had 2 dime stores in our block, and Central Brooklyn Toy Store, and the daughter there is still living too. She's 101, Ellen Paulin, and there was a bank on the other corner too, Farmers Bank, but I think that closed during the Depression.
Yeah, the building is still there, and it still says Farmers National Bank on it.
Yeah, and there were 1 or 2 shoe stores, and Thrifty Drugs was there, and then they had a fire there, and it was right next door. There was a stairway that went upstairs between us. Now, we weren't damaged, but had a lot of smoke, so we were closed for 2 weeks then, till we got that.
Do you remember about when that fire took place?
Offhand, no. I would say maybe in the 40s, or I don't remember. Then 50s moved over on the corner where Hackler's drugstore had been.
Okay. And one story definitely would like you to tell. You mentioned that one time there were some burglars that tried to break into Herget Bank. Let's go ahead and tell that story. About when did that happen?
I just read that in one of the history books. I think it was 1933. And I think it was on a Sunday morning, and Dad always went down and and let the awning down. They had to go down and roll it up again at night. But I think they broke in the back through the alley some way. And then they went upstairs and tried to drill through next door into the bank.
Yeah, so they broke into Rulings, and from Rulings they tried to break into Herget through the wall.
Yeah, yeah, but they couldn't make it and finally gave up.
Okay. All right, so let's see. So you talked a little bit about the businesses in the neighborhood along that stretch of Court Street where you are between 4th and Capitol.
Mm-hmm.
What else do you remember about some of the businesses and the owners from your time a little bit further up and down Court Street?
Well, the main business district was from, I guess, 3rd Street, which was where the railroad track went through, up until 6th Street. At that time, there weren't many way up, but their Ehrlicher drugstore was down in the next block across the street. There was a Garrick's cigar store, Shepherd Blocks on the corner, Bowman's shoe store, and it was somebody else before that I've forgotten, and Rialto Theater, and I think a tavern on the far corner. I don't remember what else. And then there was another dime store. Woolworth's was down across the street, and another shoe store. And and Empire Theater, that was the first one in town. And I don't remember farther down. I never got down that far too much.
That's around the 300 block then, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Then up in the next block, there was a Hackler's on the corner, and Netterman's Bakery, and Gore Insurance, and Arlington. And it's still there. I guess it's up on the corner of 5th Street. And there was a grocery store too. Hall's was along there, and then across the street was Cohen's Furniture. Well, they had a fire somewhere along the line and moved out along the railroad track in 1100 block, I guess, 10 or 1100 block. And there's a Home Alone. And later on, Moore's store on the corner, and the Princess Candy Kitchen. That was the hangout of all the high school kids. After the games, you couldn't get in the door until somebody came out, because it was so full.
High school students like to go to the Princess.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's where everybody gathered. And then there was a dress shop up towards the other end of the block, and I don't remember that much more about it.
Okay.
And then later on, there was, in the 500 block, when Jones came, that was in the late 1930s, I think, when they started the jewelry shop.
Jones Brothers.
Yeah, and Silco was up on the corner at one time, and Ford Garage was up on the other corner at one time. I think that's pretty early on, but I don't remember when. And across the street was the Larkin's Bakery, and then on the lower end there was I think the Dodge Garage was in there one time, and then there was forgot their names now, an appliance store along there, and a shoe shop, a repair shop, and Conasec photo. He took all the photos for the yearbooks and stuff. That was back in the 30s.
Yeah, I have seen a number of Conosuck photos from the decade of the 1930s.
Yeah.
We have, at the Pekin Public Library, there are a few old photos that he took.
Oh, yeah. Well, the son was in my class.
Okay. So, you mentioned a couple of the theaters. You mentioned the Rialto and the Empire Theater. Tell us, did you ever go into those theaters for, have any fun, see any shows there?
Very, very seldom. I think I was in the Empire maybe once. The Rialto was down on the other side of the street. And, of course, the Pekin Theater went into existence in my early years. I can't remember when, but I know, I don't remember the movie, but I remember going with my folks about the time it opened, and then during school years and all, we go to the movies for a dime on Saturday afternoon or something. And that, so that probably opened, yeah, in the 30s.
Yeah, I think that is about when the Pekin Theater opened up. Now,
it had apartments upstairs, and Coach Hosser lived up there. And I know when we were in school, and well, we went to the state basketball tournament 3 years out of the 4 that I was in high school. Finally got 3rd place, I think, at that time. But I remember that Frenchie had some of the kids stay in his apartment maybe a day or two before we went over there, keep them out of mischief.
Since we're doing this through the, this Pekin Public Library project, and this year, of course, where the library itself is celebrating a bit of an anniversary, since it's been 125 years since the library became a branch of Pekin city government. I thought I'd ask you a few questions about the old Carnegie Library building. Did you use the library?
Oh, yeah.
Did you like to
Well,
visit
I
that at all?
remember when the library was on Court Street at 5 Points. That was when I was little. And I remember, I think I was coming home from school because we lived down on Haynes Avenue, and a police dog came sniffing at my heels, and I went screaming down the street. Some man probably finally stopped it, but I've been scared of dogs ever since.
Ah, okay.
But it was across the street. Well, it was in that triangle where one of the Home and Loans is first.
Yeah, one of the
somewhere.
savings and loans.
Yeah.
It's actually the spot is at 5 Points, where Court Street and Broadway come together. That spot where the old library building stood,
Yeah.
is now just a parking lot for that
Yes.
savings and loan.
Yeah, of course, Court Street used to go all the way down, didn't zigzag,
Okay.
coming around by the church and stuff, trying to.
Yeah, we have a photo of that old building at 5 Points where the library used to be.
Red brick.
Yeah, well, it's a black and white one, so we don't know the color, but so we know what the building looked like. I think it was torn down sometime in the 50s or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
So we do know what that building looked like.
Well, there was a horse trough there, too, where the horses could stop and drink.
Okay. I'd read that building was originally constructed as a fire station.
Oh.
And when the city wasn't using it for that anymore, they had the library move in there, which would have been in the late 1890s, where it was. So it was at that spot for a while.
Well, there are houses on the rest of of that street around, and on Broadway, too.
Yeah. residential area there too. Okay. Let's see. Let's go back to your job at Rulings, and give us an idea of what a typical day was like working at Rulings. Well, you just working. What it was like for you to go through the day.
Well, I was the cashier, but then I got into buying. You know, the salesmen used to come around then and bring in their samples and everything. And of course, if we weren't busy, we were all, depends on what it was, clothes particularly. We were all gathered around if somebody didn't have a customer, this or that, watching. And I don't know, it just depends on what there was to do. I mean, I did some of the book work and had to balance the tickets every day to the sales slips and keep track of. I think the clerks mostly worked on commission, well, salary, but were on commission too, and then that had to be figured out, but it was mostly office work for me.
But when did you have to go into work in the mornings?
Well, I was supposed to be there probably at 9 o'clock, and
didn't always get there by 9?
I am late everywhere. Still am, and it's getting worse. Good intentions, but I don't know, I just fitter. I can manage most anything but time. As my friends will all attest to that.
And so then you would, a typical shift then would go then to like around 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon or later?
Yeah, we usually work till 5. I don't know if it was later than that. We used to stay open on Saturday nights, and then I think it got to, well, that went on. Well, I know we used to get together after work on Saturday night and go someplace, but then it changed to Friday. But it used to be before the mall opened, you could hardly get up and down Court Street in the main 3 blocks there. It was so crowded. I mean, just walking. Farmers came in and they'd sit in their cars and watch people go by too, but no, we really used to be busy on nights, but once the mall opened, why, that gradually died off and so on until we were the last ones left.
What was the Christmas season like?
Maddening. We used to wrap packages for people, and that took up time too, but Christmas, well, we used to stay open Christmas Eve, I think, till about 9 o'clock, but that eased off a long time ago too, but we really were busy. We'd be lucky to get out for lunch sometimes. Well, of course, I was still living at home and till I was married, and Dad and I came, well, he was always there early, but we wouldn't get home for lunch a lot of times till maybe 1:30. So my mother never knew what to prepare, couldn't prepare much anything ahead of time. So,
okay.
No, we were...
I'd like to have us talk for a little bit about the World War II years and what that was like for you, what you remembered of your life and your family, your friends, and what business was like at that time.
Well, there was rationing for a lot of things. and had food stamps and so on. And we'd have, well, I think that's about the time nylon hose came out too, and that was rationed. And when you get a shipment, you know, you'd have a list of people to call and this and that, and you know, it was just different. The girls, well, I was in one of my friends' mothers taught us how to play bridge shortly out of high school, and we had a bridge club of 2 tables, but then there were 4 or 5 of us that got together a lot of nights, and usually Sunday afternoon. I mean, we played a lot of bridge at that time because there wasn't anything much else to do, really. And of course, several of the girls had gotten married shortly out of school. And that was the early 40s, and we graduated in 38. So, and a lot of the guys were in the service, and so I remember Pearl Harbor Day because we were playing bridge, and one of the girls' boyfriends happened to be over there at the time, and so anxiously waiting to hear about him, and he was okay, but I don't know. It was just a time kind of like with the pandemic. There wasn't much else you could do.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this business was still okay through that time, I think, but it was just different.
With the Pearl Harbor attack, did you hear about that over the radio?
Yes, I think so. Well, see, that was 8 o'clock in the morning over there, I think. I don't remember. I know we were at one of my friend's house playing bridge, and somebody came in or called or said something about it. And of course that took care of the game.
I imagine it would. Were there any young men that you knew in school and from around town? Did you know any of those who were lost in the war?
Oh yeah, we lost several in our class, I think. Of course, we were the first high school class with 200 students in our graduating class. And I corresponded with 3 or 4 guys that were friends or ones that I knew. One I was kind of going with at the time, but another one that I corresponded with probably every couple of weeks or so. That was just a friend.
Yeah, so these were young men who were serving overseas during the war.
Yeah.
And so you would write to them.
Yeah.
I'm sure they appreciated that.
Well, there was one that I knew. He was an athlete. I don't know how I got to be corresponding with him because he was not a boyfriend or anything, but he was in Alaska at the time and had been for like about 3 years before he came home on furlough. And then, you know, the day he got home, he asked me to go out, and I said, well, you just got home, you need to spend your time with your family and stuff. Well, so he asked somebody else, and he went with her all the time he was home, which was fine, but...
I guess he was lonely up in Alaska.
Yeah, and then he ended up going to Battle of the Bulge and was killed over there.
Oh. Okay. Do you remember where you were when the war ended in Europe, and how you recall that news coming across?
No, offhand I don't. I know we kind of had a celebration downtown. I mean, everybody was out and stuff.
Kind of filled the streets downtown, a celebration?
Yeah, but I don't remember whether that was the European War or with Japan.
Or Japan, yeah. It would have been two big celebrations that year.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you and your husband married after the war then?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's cast our vision a little bit beyond just the Court Street area. And what do you remember of what businesses and other things were located, just say the block from where Rulings was on either side, either north and south of Court Street?
What businesses?
Yeah, what businesses do you recall, and people who you would have known from that time, who worked in those places?
Well, the Rossweiss had the Central House down there. That was a block over on Margaret Street. And of course, one of those was in my class. And Steger started over there. Louis Steger's father, they had a paint store. That was up in the next block. And there was a cleaners there around the corner, Little Star Cleaners. Antonio's ran. And Ace Liquor was up on the next corner. I can't remember for sure who had that at the time. And way back when, there was over maybe 2 blocks over lumberyard and stuff.
Was that Conklin's? The lumberyard?
I'm thinking Vildy, but maybe that Vildy Rolfs was down on 2nd Street.
Okay.
I think both of them. Conklin's was down there somewhere too. I'm not sure just where, because that wasn't stuff I was interested in as far as, doing any business there. Then over on Elizabeth Street, of course, the post office was there, and a lot of offices. There was an ice cream shop on the corner across from the Times for a while, and then the Times was there, and then Knoll Funeral Home was up towards the other end of the block, and Cunningham's Garage and Baptist Church. That whole area from 4th Street up to about 8th, I guess, and then Washington over to State Street. That's where most of the churches were.
Oh, okay.
I mean, the whole area there was just one church after another, it seemed like.
Yeah, do you remember which churches there were in those areas?
Well, the Presbyterian was next to the library,
Mm-hmm.
and the Methodist was across. First Methodist was across from the library.
That was on 4th Street then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And on the triangle across from where the post office is now, I think was a Christian church. There was some church there, and then the Baptist was on the corner of 5th and Elizabeth. And then the Congregational was up where that other home and loan, first one where the parking lot is.
Oh, okay.
And then, of course, the Lutheran is where it is now, and the Catholic too. But it just seemed like most of them were just in that area, and one by one, during the 50s or 60s, I think the churches seemed to be doing a great job, and so they were all expanding into bigger, where they had more room and parking and everything. But now it's going the other way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is true. The Catholic Church was an older, smaller church than the one that is there now, and so, of course, they didn't originally have the school. That was built around 1950-ish, I think.
I don't know. There was where the school building is now, was a doctor lived there, Dr. Skank.
Oh,
I think you mentioned him before.
Oh, that's right.
Lived there.
Because he would have.
And then there were all houses where the playground is now, on Broadway and on Tharp Place there.
Okay. Had quite a lot going on in downtown Pekin back in those days, huh?
The what?
We did have quite a lot going on in downtown Pekin back then.
That was a vital part of the town.
I know in days gone by, like in the 1890s, early 1900s, Pekin had some would hold street fairs from time to time. Were there any kinds of celebrations like that downtown that the city put on that you remember that you might have gone to as well?
Oh yeah, we had we had a watermelon festival one time, and I don't remember. That's probably maybe in the 60s or something like that. But we used to have fall festivals and have carnivals.
Carnivals?
Yeah. Ferris wheel and stuff like that.
Okay.
So that's where all the activity was. And well, then they had the fall Marigold Festival. I guess that started, well, that was Dirkson's thing.
Yeah,
that probably started in about the 80s or 90s or...
Yeah, the first Marigold Festival was in 1973.
73?
Yeah, and then Senator Dirksen died in 1969, so it was just a few years after his death.
But that was that started downtown as a yearly thing, and then it wasn't too long it moved out to the park. So, because we were, busy in those days too. That's right after the mall opened too.
I remember, at least one of the Marigold festivals in the early 80s. I do remember it being downtown.
Yes, I'd forgotten what that started. I think that's when we had a carnival as part of that to begin with, and an art fair. It was around the courthouse.
Okay. I remember reading one time that during the Christmas season they would have a Santa house near the courthouse on Court Street. What was called a Santa house.
Oh yeah.
And do you remember that?
Oh yes.
About how long that went on?
Well, it was every year for a while, of course. No, I
don't recall just quite when that started.
Don't recall how long that went on. There used to be a lot of activity downtown. I mean, that was the place where we had it. Everything. And then it started moving out to the park. And
I was wondering if you'd tell a little bit of the story of your family again. You'd mentioned about how at the very beginning we talked about your great aunt's marrying some rulings, and then there were also, I guess, another part of the family is where um, your niece's mother, Joyce, came into the family. Tell a little bit about how that came to be, how basically how they came into your family and ended up growing with you.
Well, when she had, Joyce had three older siblings, two girls and a boy. The girl was about my age, and the boy was 3 years older, and the older sister was 5 years older. And when the mother died, well, while she was sick, actually, they lived in Michigan at that time, and the younger boy and the sister and Joyce was a twin, and they came down here, and we took the Joyce and one of the twins, and the girl that was my age, and the grandparents took the other twin and the boy. But they were in their 60s. Then after the mother died, they stayed here about 3 years, I guess. 5th, 6th, and 7th grade that I was in. And then the other twin died of polio at a year and a half. So after that, the father remarried again, and so the other girl and the boy went back up and lived with him, but we kept the one twin. Then I guess my folks, I don't remember, the other girl thought that Dad had adopted her, and I didn't think he ever did legally, but anyway, we raised her and just as my sister. Mm-hmm. That's the way that went. So.
And so Joyce's father was related to your.
And my dad were brothers.
Okay.
So she had the same name anyway, and.
Memories that you have from your life that you recall of Pekin, or just from your personal life that kind of really, either especially treasured or especially memorable that you would like those who watch this video to know about?
A very eventful life as far as that goes, and not into traveling.
Didn't really take too many trips, huh?
No, I don't like that. I like to go someplace and stay there. We went to Florida for like 20 years for a month or two in the late winter, but I was never much for sightseeing because I always had to go along with the folks when I was smaller, or I made 2 or 3 trips to California where we had a relative and stuff. But I mean, into sightseeing, it just never, in history, never interested me very much.
Those trips that you've taken, most of those would have gotten by car. Did you ever have an occasion to go out of the form of transportation, like train or plane?
Not on a trip, actually. I think my first plane ride was to Florida. The local home and loans used to have, they used to have a state convention every year, and then they were doing pretty well in the 70s, so the state decided to have their convention somewhere else. One time was at Marco Island, and when that was in Florida, when that was early on. All they had was a hotel there at that time, I think, and then they went to Canada one time, and they went to Scottsdale, anyway, Arizona, And my mother had passed away, so I got to go along with Dad as the other half, and we paid my husband's way, and we went along on the trip to Florida, and there for a week, and I loved it down there. So I think after that we were there every year for about 20 years till he passed away, and rented a condo then most of the time for a month or two.
That was you and your husband would do that?
Yeah. And I just liked the beach and stuff down there.
Oh, all right. I think we've covered things fairly comprehensively. Just wanted to make sure that we didn't wrap things up until I got a chance for you to share some of the more notable memories that you have, and you've given a fair overview, and I think I've been able to paint a good picture of especially downtown Pekin, how bustling it was back in previous decades.
It really was. Of course, a lot of my friends were salespeople in the various stores too. Some of them just on like Saturday, or ones that worked. Well, the high school started sometime, I guess that was later though, anyway, that they had this distributive education, I think they called it, and then you would go to school in the morning and work someplace in the afternoon and get credit for all that. And so, you know, a lot of the kids were down there too, so that had it bustling more than normal.
I remember reading about something like that, and how during World War II, when so many of the men had gone away to fight, the Pekin Daily Times needed a sports editor, and so they hired a high school student named Dick Stolley to do that. So he would do his classes in the morning, and then he would come in.
He really
I think he mentioned that he went in early at the paper and did some work. Then he'd do some classes. Then he'd come back and do some other things. So during those years, he was kept quite busy. And of course, Dick Stolley later ended up having a pretty good career as well.
Oh, yeah, I guess. Well, and Ellen was editor.
Yeah, Ellen Paulin,
for quite a while too.
Yeah, you mentioned that her parents owned, what was the store again?
Well, yeah, I think her dad had that, and then the mother ran the print shop, which was connected with the Times.
Okay.
Too. I mean, the building was in the same building, I believe, or whatever. I don't think the Times had anything to do with it, but.
So Ellen Paulin's father ran on Court Street.
Central Book and Toy.
Central Book and Toy.
Yeah, and then I think he had a business in Peoria too after that, or had both of them.
And then, as I mentioned, Dick Stolley at the Pekin Times. And then Ellen was chosen as the paper's editor during the Second World War. So she actually is the newspaper's first female editor. I know we're still in touch with her son Tom from time to time. And he was, I think he recently gave us some information on WSIV radio, which is also, I think for a while, I'm trying to remember, WVEL, WSIV, I think it might have been SIV before WVEL. But anyway, that radio station was located in a building pretty close to the Times building, the former Zerwick campus. I think if you're satisfied, I think we've covered the ground pretty broadly and fairly comprehensively. And we could always, as I said, as was suggested, we could do a second video with your friend Shirley.
Yeah.
And that might be a possibility as well, to have you share some mutual memories and kind of maybe prompt. But for now, I do appreciate very much, Harriet, you're taking the time to share some of your memories with us of the way Pekin used to be and what kind of a life you've had here.
Thank you.